All right, guys, welcome to another episode of Stay Fearless, the Fearless Sports Performance Podcast. Today we are joined by Gabe Trastoy. Gabe played college baseball at Loyola University New Orleans, where he was a mainstay at the catcher position, owning the top three spots in the record book for most runners caught stealing in a single season, and that top spot being 66% runners caught stealing. He also holds the number one spot for runners caught stealing in a career. Gabe was a leader for the pitching staff and the best catcher I've ever thrown to. He is now an assistant coach at Loyola New Orleans and spent this summer as the head coach of the Boca Beach Boys. Gabe is an exceptional person and one of my best friends. Gabe, I couldn't be more excited to have you on, share your insights and experiences with our listeners.
It's great to finally be here, Alex. I know we've pushed back a few times. Got to finally get it done.
Yeah, it's this is going to be a good one, man, and I'm excited to kind of talk through a lot of the experiences you've had, and I know you have one of the better minds behind the plate out there, and definitely it was a pleasure to throw to you. So excited to talk through it and kind of chop it up.
Yeah.
All right. So first of all, now you're coaching, right? And so back at the old alma mater at Loyola, and you're getting to do it alongside some really great minds there, and Coach K, now Coach Bruce coming back, and all the guys there. So let's kind of talk about that, what your experience has been like now coaching, and how that relates to your experience as a player and as a catcher.
Yeah, obviously being with those two guys, Coach Hanson as well, and now Tucker Ganley joining the staff, that's a huge pickup. He's a great baseball mind. We'll see what he has to offer this year. It's going to be a tough turnaround for him. I know it was for me, going from playing with a lot of these guys to then being their coach. It's definitely a process to go through, but done the right way, it brings about a lot of respect and just a good time with all the guys. Being under Coach K and Coach Bruce, obviously you played under them as well. You know what kind of program they ran and still run. It's very professional, culture driven. Everybody's doing the right thing at the right time. And now being on the flip side of that, on the coaching side, it's impressive to see how they manage it and how much attention to detail there is with every single thing. It's really incredible. I couldn't ask for better mentors along my way.
Yeah, and kind of the culture that Coach K built at Loyola really is special in the way that he leads. The way we talked in our last podcast episode a lot about that culture that he built, and kind of the centerpiece of it is that earning respect. So let's kind of talk about that and talk about how you maintain that culture and build that kind of earning respect attitude that comes with that really brings that winning mindset.
Yeah, absolutely. Earning respect is our number one focus throughout the year, throughout everything we do. If there's one thing that you can focus on throughout the whole year, and it's just that, it's going to get you a long way. It's not just about, oh, I'm the best, so I think I'm the best, right? Like that's a bad way to think about it. Earning respect is all the work you put in prior to the game, everything you do throughout your day. If you're treating your body right, if you're actually getting in the gym and doing the right things, if you're hurt, it's how you recover, it's how you treat your rehab, it's everything you do. And these guys have created a culture here that it's not even a question whether most of these guys are earning respect. It's, we know you're getting the job done out off the field, in the classroom, wherever it may be. Now it's just taking that to the field and earn respect from every single one of our opponents.
Yeah, totally. And I think we kind of we've experienced multiple different kinds of programs and multiple different that kind of spectrum of that winning culture. And I think it's really cool to have seen both sides and then be part of something that is so high level, and to really understand, like, all right, like this is a really cool thing that we're doing, and feel it, right? Because it like gives you life, when you feel that something in the air, special.
Yeah, it feels professional is what it feels like. you know that every single one of these guys that's on your team is doing the right thing and is going to have your back no matter the outcome. So, like, why not just go out there and have a good time doing it? We've put in the work, we've put in the time. We know that we can get the job done. Just go out there and do it.
Yeah, yeah. And it really allows you to just like go out and compete. Because once you've earned that respect from yourself and you've put in all that work, it's like, all right, like let's just, throw it out on the table and see what happens. As opposed to, if you don't have that work put in and you're kind of a poser, then it's like, all right, a lot of anxiety starts to creep in of like, all right, do I really, deserve to be here? Can I really beat this guy? And then you start to doubt yourself. You start looking at, all these different things, or looking at yourself too much or whatever it might be. But when you've earned that respect from yourself and you put in that work, then it's like, all right, let's just go out there and compete our butts off and see what happens. And the game becomes so much more fun like that, and you perform so much better that way.
Yeah, and there's a different chemistry to teams like this that have that kind of culture. I experienced that this summer with my team and some of the other teams in our league. Um, our team had kind of a free, like, just go out there and play, feel to it. Guys would show up to the field. Everybody was like, you go to the cage, get your cuts in, or BP on the field, whatever it is. You get stretched out, you're ready to go. Then we got some time to kill before the game. Like, everybody's laughing, having a good time. Then game starts, like, boom, we're locked in. We put in the work. We know what we got to do. Whereas some of these other teams, you see, like, all these guys are stressed out before the game. Like, oh, I got to do my plyo balls, and they got the serious face on. Oh, I got to get my sprints in before the game, and they're all locked up. It's like, when you put in that work and you have that culture, that atmosphere in the team, everybody just plays freer, plays better, has more fun.
Yeah, yeah. And at the end of the day, it's a kid's game, right? And like, yeah, you got to put in that work. You got to do what you got to do. You got to, show up to the field locked in and ready to go. But that doesn't mean you can't go out there and have fun. And when you've really earned that respect from yourself, you can just go out there and compete and enjoy the work that you've put in and the competitive spirit that you put out there every day. It's total game changer. It just frees you up to succeed. And I want to talk about that experience you had over the summer. Being a head coach. Obviously, that's a new experience. So, like, let's talk about that and some of the difference. I want to talk about the differences first between being a player, then being a coach, and then the difference between being an assistant coach and a head coach, and just the tidbits that you've learned along the way and all the different things that's brought you and the insights that it's brought you to, like, all right, how can I approach this in a way that is going to be most conducive for the players and their, development and success, both as a team and as individuals.
Yeah, absolutely.
I know it's a
The
lot, but we'll kind of,
biggest, no, yeah, we'll break it down, deconstruct it a little bit. Um, the biggest difference that I've seen from player to coach is it's a widening of your lens. Now I see things that, as a player, say Coach K would explain to me, and I wouldn't understand it, or I thought I understood it, but I really wasn't. And then now I have this wider lens and I see it from farther away, and I'm able to understand it and grasp it. And it's like, it even happened this year in the fall. We're in the cages over at Junction Sportsplex, and I'm telling him something about somebody else's swing. Right, we're just there in the cage, and I see something about his turn. I can't remember exactly what it was, and I go, "Hey, coach, isn't shouldn't he do this?" I don't remember exactly what it was, like I said. And he's like, "Yeah, Gabe, you know how many times I've told you that?" And I'm like, "Well, yeah, it just makes so much sense now because I have this wider lens and I'm seeing it from a new perspective."
Mhm.
That's the biggest thing, is your perspective changes on everything. It's not, oh, I need to do this a certain way. It's, oh, I know how this should be done. Now let me try to replicate it, or get
Mm,
somebody to try to replicate it.
yeah, yeah. And when it comes to like getting guys to make those changes, obviously it's hard because everybody needs to make different changes and everybody's body is different. Everybody moves differently. Everybody, certain things work for some guys and other things don't. And we've talked a lot about like real versus feel and how that kind of plays into that. So how do you go, obviously when you're a player, you're kind of just looking at yourself and what you need specifically, but as a coach, you're looking at all these different guys who are totally different. How do you go about being able to meet each player exactly where they are and have that, perspective of like, all right, let me not try to teach everybody the same thing, but it's like, all right, how do I meet them where they're at and give them what they specifically need?
Yeah. The biggest thing there is always going to be communication. What I've learned over these last 2 years is that having an open line of communication with the players makes the biggest difference, because if you're just spitting drills and spitting things to do at them, it's like if you're just throwing things at a wall, it's just bouncing right back. Nothing's getting absorbed. You want them to be a sponge, right? So if you're constantly communicating with them, knowing how they feel, seeing how certain things make them feel, and then building a routine based off of that, now you're actually getting somewhere, as opposed to let's just go to the cage and hit 30 high tee, right? Like that only does so much if it's not actually creating a good feel in a player's swing. Or a pitcher, for example, like say a guy can't throw strikes. Okay, let's go throw all our bullpens in the 9 pocket.
Mm-hmm.
Well, maybe that's not the best thing for some guys because they need to see a catcher. And then when the catcher's there, they're all over the place because they haven't seen them
Mm-hmm.
in the last 7 bullpens, whatever it was.
Yeah, that makes sense. That makes sense. And I think that's big, is like if you have that open line of communication, a lot of guys sometimes they know what they need, or they can, if you facilitate the thought process, they can kind of deduce it better than, yourself, because they know themselves, right? And they know what they're feeling. And so I feel like that's big, is like, all right, if we can work at this together instead of, me just dictating, all right, this is what we're going to do, it makes things a lot easier, a lot more simple to kind of figure out the solutions to whatever problem's coming up.
Yeah, not only that, it's after after you have that open line of communications and you develop something that helps them create a feel, is that feel actually working? Is it working in game? Is it working in scrimmage? Do you feel uncomfortable doing this even though it's creating a good feel? You can have a good feel for something but still be uncomfortable. It's
Yeah.
you got to have that line of communication open always, and it's got to be continuous throughout a season, throughout fall, whatever it may be. Just keep on working at it, have that communication open, talk about everything. That's one thing that I learned this summer with a lot of my players. They were kind of, especially new relationships, summer, you blend quickly, but it's not the deepest relationship, I'd say. So it's like I'm going to these guys, hey, just tell me how you're feeling with this. Is it working? Is it not? Do you feel uncomfortable? If you do, let's try something different. See if that works. It's not just, oh, I've told you to do this, so do it.
Yeah, I think that's so important. And something I kind of harp on a lot is like, when it comes to being successful, I think baseball is an interesting sport. And I say this the same line over and over again. I feel like a broken record, but it's like, you know, it's a team sport, but it's also a bunch of one-on-one battles between the pitcher and the hitter. And I always say that 9 times out of 10, the guy who's going to win that battle is the one who's more comfortable. Um, that was something I tried to do a lot as a pitcher, because I knew I wasn't going to blow, a mid 90s fastball by you or have a bunch of nasty stuff. So I was like, all right, I can beat you by making you uncomfortable, by moving fast, by, not missing spots, by, throwing it at your hands, whatever it might be. So it's like, all right, if you can make a guy uncomfortable, your chances of being successful are significantly higher. And as a hitter, it's impossible to hit when you're uncomfortable. But when you're comfortable, it's like, all right, I could hit anything. Same thing as
You
a
get that
pitcher. If you're
108 at me and
uncomfortable,
I'm going to hit it.
exactly, exactly. And if you're a pitcher, it's the same thing. If you're uncomfortable up there, it doesn't matter who's in the box. Like, you're gonna get shelled. Versus if you're comfortable and you're in that like zone state, it's a game changer.
Yeah, I don't know if you saw Bauer's 19 strikeout video. I know sometimes
Mhm.
you watch his stuff.
Yeah.
I think there's a part where the manager comes to try to take him out, and I think that exactly what he describes is how you should feel when you're in the box or on the mound or making a play, whatever. He describes it as this, what was it exactly? Anxious adrenaline.
Mm.
right? Like
Yeah.
it's not bad anxiety where you're like nervous about what's about to happen. It's I'm a little anxious because I'm about to do something. Like I'm
Yeah.
fired up. I'm locked in right here. I'm gonna make this happen.
Yeah, that's your fight or flight response, right? That's like your sympathetic nervous system turning on. And like you can either take it as, and it has something to do with how you look at it. Because a lot of people will, and there's studies on this, a lot of people will experience the same thing, but they'll describe it differently. And then that will dictate the outcome of how they perform. And so all it is it's like your body, shooting yourself with adrenaline, getting you ready to either fight or flight. And it's like, all right, if you're going to choose the flight and you're going to, choose to look at it as like, I'm nervous, I'm anxious, this is bad, then, it works against you. But if you choose to fight and you look at it as like, my body's getting ready for competition, and this is something that's going to amplify my performance and help me focus more, which it can do that, those guys who do that, they end up succeeding at a significantly higher rate, and it maximizes their performance. And so a lot of that is like, yeah, how are you looking at what you're feeling? And are you using it to maximize your performance, or are you allowing it to detract from what you're doing?
Yeah, absolutely. It's a mindset approach thing. If you have the right approach, the right mindset to handle whatever's thrown your way, whether it's some anxiety, some nervousness, whatever it is, you can change your outcome just by your mindset, your approach. That's
Mhm.
something that we talk about a lot as well. Mindset approach, the mental side of the game that
Yeah.
for way too long has been undervalued.
Yeah, it's so big, man. I mean, I would say it's significantly more than just half of the game, and especially baseball, because it's such a game of failure. You have to have that approach with your mindset.
Yeah, I
Something
mean, if you're
that's
a big leaguer, if you're a Hall of Famer, you fail 7 out of 10 times.
Yeah, yeah, and I think it could look different for everybody, but at the end of the day, it has to be something that's positive, that's allowing you to kind of get into that zone state where Coach K was saying you're externally narrow focused, or narrowly externally focused or whatever. I think that's, if it allows you to get into that zone state where you're just focused on the task in front of you in a way that you got those blinders on and it's just like locked in, I think that's, whatever it takes to get you there, like that's where you got to get.
Yeah, I love when we talk about external narrow focus or narrow external focus. I forget exactly which way as well. Um, because yeah, we talk about mindset and approach and everything that leads up, but that can't be your worry when you're actually doing it. You have to have that narrow external focus where it's I'm worried about this pitch. I'm worried about this play. I'm worried about this incoming pitch if I'm a hitter, right? It's not, oh, I'm on the mound about to I'm in my windup, about to start my windup. Oh, I'm worried about my mindset. Where's my mind at? No, that's not the time. It's all that work you put in before to work on that mindset so that you can be in that moment. Okay, fastball, let's go.
Yeah, exactly. That was something that I feel like when we were playing, did a good job of like creating with each other. And I felt like we had probably, I mean, I thought it was one of the most special, pitcher catcher connections that you could create. And it was nice, throwing one of my best friends and kind of having that trust. And I think, part of that comes from the work you put in ahead of time and the relationship you have. But part of that too comes from that mindset of like, how are you, what are you both bringing? And are you able to, feed off of each other? And not just pitcher catcher, but, a whole team. I feel like that's huge. Is like, it's bigger than just yourself. It's also the culture that you're around, the people you're with, and are you feeding off each other and building that within your program? And I'm sure you and Kay and the rest of the staff are doing a hell of a job there because historically that's what's been happening that way.
Yeah, we're on a good trajectory right now. See if we can keep it going, elevate it a little bit more even.
Yeah, yeah, 100%, man. Get you guys to keep moving up in the accolades. I think is I'm excited to see what happens. So kind of want to pivot a little bit, or actually let's move forward to the original question I asked. So now let's talk about the difference between being an assistant coach and a head coach, and talk about some of the things you've learned there and the different perspective that's given you.
Yeah, being an assistant coach, is sometimes difficult, is almost always very rewarding. I get to learn from some amazing minds, and I get to ask questions and just learn stuff that I don't think I've learned from other places, which has been such a blessing. And being an assistant coach, one thing you learn is, yes, it's about earning respect and having the authority, but you're also kind of a bridge between head coach and player. Like, you need to have a deeper relationship with these players so that what you are telling them comes across right, because you don't want to be a dictator. You don't want to be that guy that's always like, do this, do that, do the other. It's almost like you're not quite a buddy, but you're friends with these guys. You need to have that good relationship where I can just tell you whatever, so that, or I can just tell you anything and you can give me feedback. It's not just bullshit.
Yeah.
And then
Yeah.
being a head coach is slightly different, where you still want that good relationship, but not quite as much where you're losing respect from some of these guys. Because, I mean, you've seen it. When you're the head guy, you need to have the most respect from everybody. Assistant guys, like, you're still commanding that respect and trying to get that respect from everybody. But there's a little more leeway where it's like, I can tell you something just joking around. Not everything has to be so serious.
Yeah. Yeah. Totally get that. And, you know, kind of want to hear a little bit about your summer experience. And, we already talked about it a little bit, but, obviously you have a lot more, responsibility there in the way that you're, working with the guys and the decision making and stuff like that. So let's kind of talk about that and some of the insights you've gotten there, you've learned.
Yeah, I remember right in my first lineup this summer, I was like, holy, who's going to play where? I mean, who's going to hit where? The positioning is easier, as you'd imagine. Like,
Mhm.
there's usually a clear difference between your couple of outfielders, your couple of infielders, and usually for sure your catchers.
Mhm.
But then writing a lineup, it's like you really got to think through game situations, think 10 steps ahead. I found myself, sorry about that. I caught myself at the beginning of the summer kind of stuck, where I'm thinking, yeah, maybe I pinch hit this guy right here. And then I'm thinking about it too late. So he's actually walking up to bat and I don't have the chance. And then say that guy strikes out. Not that the other guy wouldn't have, but if I'm thinking 10 steps ahead, maybe that guy has a better chance in that situation. And
Yeah.
I was obsessive through our first 15 games, watching them back, thinking about every situation, just trying to be ahead of the eight ball rather than behind. And where I finally clicked for me, where I had the revelation, was it was probably like game 22, something like that, 23, where we have bases loaded, no outs in the bottom of the ninth, or bases loaded, two outs in the bottom of the ninth. Sorry. And not to say this guy wasn't a good hitter, but he was having a bad day at the plate that day. He's coming up to bat. And I had already in my head, I was like, if this opportunity comes and he's the one up to bat, I know who I want to hit instead. And it was just about not hesitating with it. I had already had a plan. I knew what I wanted to do, made the change. Dude hits a walk-off grand slam.
There you go.
And it's like,
Yeah.
just seeing myself get over that hesitation, just go through with it. Don't care what anybody thinks. I'm It's kind of like the imposter syndrome thing that you hear a lot of guys talk about. It's
Yeah, I
like,
feel that heavy as a new PT. I totally get that, man. I think that with anything that you're doing that's new, uh, I get that, and I think you just got to trust yourself, let things
yeah,
happen.
exactly. It's trusting yourself. That's the best way to put it. Having that faith, like I put in the work. I know what to do right here. I sometimes it's not always the case. You don't always know what to do, but you just trust your gut, make a decision, and roll with it. See what happens.
Yeah, totally. That's as a coach, as a player, and anything in your life, um, once you're able to trust, and that's earning respect, right? That's the first step is earning that self-respect to know you put in the work and you know what you're doing. And then you can just go out there and compete, make the calls, make the decisions, and let the game happen. Um, frees you up, frees you up totally.
Yeah, it was so different. I mean, obviously we played together. You know that I called all the pitches
Yeah.
for our last 2.5 years together, close to three.
Mhm.
And it's just so different because I was so used to calling pitches. Those calls were easy. Like I wouldn't need to even think about it. Like when you were on the mound, I was like, all right, we just threw a cutter away. We're either going to double this up or go change up in. Like Alex's changeup has been all right today. It hasn't been his best, so we're going to go cutter away. Boom, we strike that guy out.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. And I
then
think
it's a whole new thought process of decisions. It's every aspect of the game. It's not just one.
totally, I think, that's huge is like, especially you already kind of had that as a catcher, you kind of already have that, like, all right, I got to make decisions here. And you did it at such a high level as a catcher. And so I think that, kind of bleeds into it. And it's like, all right, like, I've been here before. I know how to make the calls. Let's trust myself as a player, as a coach, as everything like that. That's so big. And I want to kind of pivot and talk about your experience as a catcher and some of the advice that you could give now, looking back at your career to some of the young guys. But before we kind of get into that, I want to, kind of set the story with anybody listening. Like, and I'll kind of, talk a little bit about Gabe here. Is like, so that last season that I played with him, that he was my catcher, was the best season of my career. And I want to say I didn't shake off Gabe a single time the entire season. I just put my head down and freaking went out and competed, and whatever he told me to go with, that's what we went with. And I think part of that is there was very few times that I was thinking differently than he was, if at all. I felt like we knew each other so well, we knew each other's plans so well that we just kind of were on the same page all the time. But the other part of that was like Gabe and I lived together. I'd get up to go to the bathroom and take a piss in the middle of the night, and I would hear Gabe, watching the games of whoever we were going to face, the next day. And so like when you know that your guy is putting in that work, and this is building a culture, and doesn't have to just be with your catcher, with any of your teammates. When you know that they're putting in the work, it just makes it so much easier to trust the guys around you. And when you're able to do that, trust yourself, trust the guys around you, trust the guy calling pitches, trust the coaching staff, trust everybody on your team. It just allows you to go out there and just compete and let things happen. And that totally changes everything. And so Gabe is, one of the best catchers and catcher minds out there. So let's kind of talk about some of the things that you did as a catcher to kind of build that, and prepare for game planning, pitch calling, scouting teams, all of that stuff, just all that prep that goes into being a high level catcher, and then how that relates to now your experience as a coach, and what are the things that you look back on now and you're like, all right, these are the things that I recommend that young guys do.
Yeah. It all comes back to communication again. Like there wasn't a time that I wasn't talking to one of you guys on the staff, trying to pick your brains, seeing what you like to throw against certain guys, what you like to throw in certain counts. If you like to double this up, if you like to double this up. As a catcher, like you need to know your pitchers better than they know themselves. I used to tell guys that, like just messing with them, right? Like you got to trust me right here. I know you better than you know yourself, right? Because sometimes it is true. Not all pitchers, but a lot of pitchers have a little bit of an ego. They're like, yeah, I can blow my fastball by him, which is not always the case. Sometimes you just got to trust the guy that you know. I was always there catching all your guys' bullpens. Like I wanted to do that every day, every week, whenever it was, so that not only did I know what you wanted to throw, I knew whether you were throwing it well, how you've been throwing it over the last few weeks, if you've had a good feel, whether you're comfortable throwing it in a 3-0 count, let's say if it's a slider or whatever. Like some guys, no way they could throw a 3-0 slider. They're just not possible. It's a guaranteed walk. And then you got other, like you, for example, it could be 3-0, which didn't happen very often with you, but it could be
Every
3-0 and
once in a
we're
while.
calling whatever. Yeah, once in a while, but it was more of a two seam in if it was going to be a walk. Like just
Yeah,
hit the
and even
guy.
then too, yeah, yeah, and even then too, like I felt like for me when I got put in those situations that it was 3-0 or I was behind, it almost like allowed me to focus even more because it was like like, I felt like I had put in that work, and this is part of that earning self-respect, that I was in a place where my mindset at that point in my career was like, all right, like let's go compete. This is an opportunity to go win and kind of, steal, like David Goggins said, steal this guy's soul and be like, all right, like now I'm not going to miss a spot because now I'm down 3-0. Oh, guess what? You just unleashed the beast. And when you have a catcher that knows exactly, all right, like these are the pitches that he's going to lock in on, that it gives you confidence, right? Because when I know you're calling something, immediately for me, it was like, all right, like let's rock, like let's go. Cause I knew it was the best call for the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. And like I said, it's that communication every single time, not just you, but everybody. When you guys were on the mound, we come back in from the dugout, we talk about exactly what just went on that inning. We're
Mhm.
like we detox after games, right? But it was a little mini detox every inning. Like, did that feel good? Did you like throwing that pitch in this count? Yes, no. You didn't? All right, let's do something about it. Like we're not just gonna wait around and work on it next week in the bullpen. No, let's handle it right now. Like
Mhm.
there's a lot of young catchers I see now that, especially this summer, one catcher in specific, I would talk to him quite a bit. Like, dude, go talk to your pitcher in between the inning. Why are you not doing that? Why are you not seeing where he's at, how he's feeling? Like maybe maybe he doesn't have a good feel for his curveball today, and he's throwing it because he thinks he can get outs with it anyway. But maybe he's gonna have more success with his fastball because he's more comfortable with that. Like if you're not talking to him, you don't know that, and you can't. It's not making the decision for him. You can't just help guide him towards that decision.
Yeah. And I think it's a constant conversation. It doesn't just end, at the beginning of the outing or whatever. I felt like there were times that I would throw and it wasn't until halfway through the outing that I'd find a pitch. And then it would be like, oh, now I have better feel for that than anything else. And so it's a constant, adapting to each other and, communication. And I felt like there were multiple times that, we'd get back in the dugout and we'd sit right next to each other and be, all right, Gabe, like I'm feeling this, feeling that, whatever. And then the next inning, it was like, okay, now I'm feeling this. This was well, like this went well with this guy. I want to throw that. Or there were times that you'd come to me and you would be like, all right, like this is what I'm seeing. I want to do this a lot. How do you feel about that? Like, or whatever it is. Or like, hey, guys aren't seeing this, or this batter reacted this way to this, and that's telling us this. And, it's when you have that open line of communication and that trust in each other, um, it makes it so much easier because then when you come to me with that advice, it's like, all right, like, when you trust a catcher like that, it's like, all right, like, yeah, like that makes like whatever you say, like I know that you put in the work. I know you see it. I know you have that mind, that eye, um, and it allows you to just trust and be like, all right, there's no egos here. It's like, yeah, let's rock, let's work together, let's make it happen.
Yeah, and with that trust comes along like sometimes I would say stuff to other guys. I don't remember if you did specifically, and they tell me, "Yo, go kick rocks." Like, okay, that's fine. Like this is just what I'm seeing. If that's not what you're feeling, then okay, maybe it was something else. Let's see if it's something. But if we
Yeah.
don't see it's something, like that's fine. You can tell me, dude, that's not what I'm feeling. That's not helping me. Okay, we'll move on from that. But let's just keep talking. I'm just trying to develop that relationship with you where you can tell me whatever and I'm going to have your back.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's, and that applies to coaching too, right? Like that's that communication that you want to have with, not just your teammates, but between your coach and your players. And like, all right, if you can have that two-way open line of communication where, you're constantly learning from each other. And, as a coach, obviously you're doing a lot of the mentoring, but, you're also getting that feedback from the player and you're able to have that communication where it's like, all right, this is what I'm feeling. This is what I'm thinking. Being able to have the trust to be able to disagree, I think is super important.
Yeah, absolutely. I can't remember how many times I may have disagreed with something, for example, Bruce might have said, but we had that trust where it was like, hey, let's talk about it.
Yeah.
I want to see where you're coming from. And obviously, I want to tell you where I'm coming from. And then maybe there's a middle ground, or maybe you can poke a hole in something I said and show me how it's the wrong thing, or I see something wrong with what you said and we can poke a hole in that. It's literally just keep that communication open, talk about everything. As a coach, for sure, I've seen that so much. Like the more you talk to these guys, the more you get through to them, the more you don't have to say as much. You can just say one little thing and they're like, yeah, yeah, I got you, coach.
Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Totally. Um, I think that's big, man. I think that's big. I kind of want to pivot, talk about, a couple more topics, but because as a catcher and now as a coach, you've seen so many pitchers. I want to ask you what you find makes pitchers most successful, whether that be abilities, like physical abilities, or intangibles, but just some of those traits, those traits that stand out the most to you.
So, especially at the NAI level, the biggest thing that stands out is your mindset on the mound. Are you a quote unquote dog up there, right? I don't want to curse, but if you don't give up, you know what, when you're up there on the mound, you're going to have success. Like whatever happened in that last pitch, it doesn't matter. It only matters about the next pitch. Those are the guys that have the most success. Now, when you get to higher levels, you see a little bit more disparity in that there could be guys throwing 82 that have that mindset that they just get lit up, and that is what it is. But if you're one of these guys with these big time arms and you don't have a good mindset behind it, you're not going to have success. It's so clear to me the guys that do have success and don't. And that doesn't mean you have to be like this, oh, big bravado macho guy. Like you can be quiet and be to yourself and still have that killer instinct, killer mentality mindset.
Yeah.
You don't a lot of guys try to fake it, right? Which is where you see a lot of these posers, like
Yeah. No
they'll
poser
strike
policy,
somebody.
man.
Yeah, exactly. It's I hate posers, but you'll see a lot of these pitchers like they have a big time arm and they don't really have a good mindset behind it, so they try to fake it. Like they'll strike somebody out and be like screaming all over, but you can tell it's forced, it's fake. That's not who they are. They're doing that to try to give off this energy that isn't really true to them. And that's
Mhm.
the worst thing you can do. It's just working completely against that mindset of being who you are, not giving up blank, and just worrying about the task at hand, not
Mhm.
what happened before, not what's going to happen after. One pitch at a time.
Totally, man. Totally. One pitch at a time. Like, what is the task? And keep it narrowly focused, right? Like, this is what we got. Like this next pitch, I'm gonna lay that brick down perfectly. You just do that one time after the other, you're gonna have something built that's unbelievable. But if you try to build the whole house all at once, or you're thinking about the 7 bricks that you just laid, you know, you're not going to be able to focus and execute at a high level. I think that's massive.
Yes, especially as a pitcher, like you shouldn't be worrying about, oh, I need to tunnel this off this during an at bat. Like that's your catcher's job. Let him worry about that. He's calling the pitch for you. Maybe you disagree, but he's working on that for you. He knows the scouting report. As the pitcher,
Yeah.
like You just got to have faith that he's put in that work so you can just worry about the next pitch.
Yeah. And I think, obviously I was very privileged to have a guy like you, and a lot of guys are, but a lot of guys aren't, that they don't have, there's a lot of guys out there that don't have catchers that can, work at a level like that. So, it kind of depends on where you're at, but I think that, I think you're spot on though. I think it's important to be able to focus on the moment, right? I don't think that you should be thinking 10 pitches ahead. Like, oh, in this at bat, these are the things I want to do. I think you should focus one pitch at a time. But if you are the guy that, you do need to kind of figure things out for yourself, I think it's more important to say, all right, this is the pitch I just threw. Now, with that information, I can focus on doing this. And that's where the tunneling kind of comes together, as opposed to
Yeah,
thinking like, oh,
absolutely.
on the strikeout pitch, I want to do this. So I need to prepare for that strikeout pitch. It's like, no, let's rock one pitch at a time and adjust accordingly to what the hitter told us each time, even if it's just the pitcher having to do that job. And you're one of those guys that needs to shake off all the time. Hopefully not, but especially in some of certain levels, minor league, sometimes like that, you're kind of on your own as a pitcher. You got to kind of figure it out for yourself. Um, and hopefully you're in a situation that you can rely on your catcher and you got a guy that's behind there doing all the work for you. But that's not always the case. But 100%, you got to focus on the task at hand, very specific task at hand, specifically in that moment.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, not to disagree, I do agree, but I'm saying if you have that open line of communication with your catcher, then it allows you to focus on that task at hand a little bit more because you have that trust
Yeah,
built. Whether he's the best pitch caller or not, you're trusting him in that moment, and you are going to disagree at times. It's everybody's human, right? That's just going to happen. But if you have that trust, you've built a foundation. It just makes it easier to focus on one task.
100%. I couldn't agree more. And I think that's also like that happens off the field too, right? Like we had a great relationship and understood each other as players, and we're always on the same page. I think partly because we were so close in life, right? And like knew each other so well and for so long, and like
Yeah, I
truly
mean,
knew each other as people. Yeah,
we went to elementary school together. It's hard to
exactly.
not have a good relationship after knowing each other so long like that.
Yeah, and I think we put in that. I mean, we're always spending time together, right? And like when you know someone and know how they think and know how they tick and know what's going through their head, and it's bigger than baseball, right? And that allows you to like, all right, like these are all the things that they're dealing with, and like me when I get into that competitive mindset, I get a little crazy, and so like I felt like a big part of that too was like you knew exactly when to rile me up, you knew exactly when to calm me down, you knew exactly when to keep me where I'm at, you knew exactly when to give me like the subtle like all right, like let's rock or like good job or whatever it was. And that's a big part of it too. Like it's so much bigger than just like all right, what pitch are we calling? You really got to know each other to be at that high level of performance that you really bring the best out of each other.
Yeah, like there'll be times where you just give me a look in a certain way, and I'd be like, "All right, Alex wants to throw a cutter right here." Like it's just like I said earlier, knowing each other better than you know yourselves. Like
Yeah,
we lived together, and you knew what I was doing all times of the day. Like you knew my schedule, you knew what I was doing. You and I knew what you were doing. Like we had that trust, we had that relationship where it just made everything easier.
yeah, yeah, totally, man. And it's funny you say that, man. I remember so many moments that you'd put a pitch down and I'd be like, oh yeah, like that's exactly what I wanted to see, man. Let's go. And it was just like I felt like it was at least every at bat, and that's what you want, right? That's what you want, and that takes time. It takes years. Takes effort. It's almost like a marriage, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So we'll kind of finish on one more topic. Want to kind of talk to you about, and I think this will be a good topic to finish off on. But now you've been part of a real awesome winning culture for multiple years, and so I want to ask you about even more so of what we learned as players, but like what are the big things that you're learning that really truly creates a winning culture? And I want to talk a little bit about, the turnaround we had and how you've maintained that. And those really big, like traits that winning teams carry. Obviously, we've talked about it a little bit, but I want to kind of harp on that and keep talking about it to kind of finish off the podcast.
Yeah. One of the biggest things I've noticed within our kind of culture is that yes, there are people who are leaders per se, but there's no distinct leadership in the group. Like there's always the guys that are going to say something and be the example or lead by example, but everybody's under the same mindset, whether it's earning respect or just showing up and being a pro. Everybody has that similar mindset, so the chemistry is just there and the culture just builds itself. Now the steps we took to put in or the steps we put in to get there, especially from where we were, was difficult, but you saw a quick turnaround with us because there was a bunch of guys that wanted to do it. We wanted to have a good culture. We didn't want to be a laughing stock anymore. Unfortunately, that's where we were. We were kind of the laughing stock of our conference. And we turned that around in year and a half. Like everything just changed because we had a bunch of guys that were just bought in to everything we did. That's the one of the bigger things as well, just everybody buying in to what we're doing. Like you can't have guys that say they're buying in and in practice they're doing the right thing, but then every Tuesday, Thursday, Wednesday, Friday they're going out and not treating their bodies right. Like it's in everything that you do. You saw it across the board, especially your last year and on. Like there was more of a shift even from our first year with Coach Kennedy, where you still saw less guys going out and actually like tracking their calories, trying to take better care of their bodies. After that, it was even more like you would see groups of guys in the gym together, not just a couple guys in the gym together. You would see guys cooking for each other, like at the Shack, for example. I know that they were always cooking for each other, tracking calories, making sure they're getting their protein. And that's just, you saw a whole group of people bought in, and then those that didn't got left behind.
Mhm. Yeah, and I think that's where culture comes into it, right? Is like those first few years at Loyola, I felt like, I worked hard, but it was so much harder to truly fully lock in. Obviously, me and Larry had each other, but like for those of you who don't know, Larry's one of my best friends. Me, Gabe, and Larry are kind of the trifecta, and Larry's my throwing partner. So we kind of did everything together. And so we kind of had each other to kind of go through that ride, but it's so hard to do it when you don't have like a full culture around you to push you. When you have everybody around you pushing you, you can learn from each other. You're pushing each other. You're holding each other accountable, and it makes it more fun. It's not as much of a grind because everybody's doing it. And so, it's just like it totally changes the game. Your lifts are better. I remember, those first few years I'd go to the gym and I'd be like the only one in the gym or like the couple guys that we'd go together. Whereas like, those last couple of years that I was there, it's like you go to the gym, it doesn't matter what hour of the day, some group from the team is going to be there and you're going to get a good lift in together. You're going to push each other. My favorite was always lifting with Alan because he'd just like look at a weight and like point at it and give you a look yes, that one. And be like, all right, let's rock. and I love
Yeah,
that, man,
Alan
because
would
then you're
always hit
just
the. My bad, didn't mean to cut you off.
no, you're good. You're good. Go ahead.
He would always had the 165 farmer carries or whatever it was, and he'd be like,
Yeah,
"Yeah, you
man.
got that. You got that easy."
Yeah, yeah. And I love that, man, because then it's like, all right, now you're pushing each other to heights that you couldn't do alone. And when you have that and it like, you're not just working for yourself, because now it's like, all right, like that guy's counting on me to kind of do what he's saying that I can do, and you don't want to let him down. it brings it all together and allows you to just, put yourself in a higher position, be more successful. And, it's that synergy of like the group is better than, each part put together. Right. So it's like when you put everybody together, it's more than the sum of each part. Right. So, I thought that was so apparent with the culture we had built, and I'm sure it's still apparent, because, I feel like that's so pivotal, in taking your game to the next level. When you're around people that really elevate yourself, it totally changes it.
Yeah, absolutely. I couldn't agree with that anymore.
Yeah. I think that's a good spot to leave it off. We got to do this again and keep the conversation going um, and just keep going, because I feel like we could talk forever and just keep the conversation flowing. So we'll cut it off here, and I'm sure we'll have you back on soon. But yeah, any other points you want to make before we finish?
Nah, just it was great to be on. Thank you for having me. I will definitely be looking forward to coming back, and have a safe flight tonight.
Thank you, man. All right, for everybody listening in, hope you can get a lot from this. Take these points, apply them to your game, whatever it is, and really, elevate yourself. For everybody, stay fearless.